Welcome to the first Chemistry 10-minute video. This is about general concepts. Like in maths, where you first need to learn how to add, which is the equivalent of crawling, and then you learn how to multiply, which is walking, and then you can solve complicated equations, which is the equivalent of running. And this is how it works in maths, and that's the same concept we try in chemistry. So before we can continue with more complicated work, we need to go through the general concepts. The first one we're going to talk about is the periodic table. Now this is the periodic table, but first you need to know how to read the periodic table. For this you need the key. So if we focus on this part of the periodic table, you can see that the Cu is the symbol for the chemical element, which is in this case copper. The 29 is the atomic number, and there's your electronegativity. But the most important part that I want you to know is the 63.5, the number below the element, which is the molecular mass. We're going to use this number in calculations, and we need you to know where to find it on the periodic table. The next concept that we need to talk about is the mole. Mole is an amount of substance. When you work in a kitchen and you speak about 1 dozen, you know that it is 12 of something. For example, 1 dozen eggs is 12 eggs. In chemistry, we talk about a mole, which is 6.022 times 10 to the power of 23. That means that 1 mole of iron is 6.022 times 10 to the power of 23 iron molecules. Now instead of saying that long, complicated number over and over again, we rather just use the word mole. So you know what mole stands for, but you need to be able to calculate mole. So don't worry too much about that big number. I just want you to know that if I speak about 1 mole of iron, I mean that it is this amount of iron molecules. How to calculate moles? Moles as the symbol of N. So N, which is moles, is equal to mass, which is measured in grams, and molecular mass, which is measured in grams per mole. So if you want to calculate moles, you take the mass, which is in grams, divided by molecular mass, which is in grams per mole, which you get from the periodic table, as explained earlier in this video. Example 1. Calculate the number of moles in iron in an 11.7 gram sample. Moles is mass divided by molecular mass. The mass is given to you in the question, 11.7 grams. The molecular mass you get from the periodic table, which is the number below the element, as I showed previously, which is in this case 56. Moles is then 11.7 grams, which you get from the question, divided by 56, which is the molecular mass you get from the periodic table. Then it gives you 0.2089 moles. Example 2. Calculate the number of moles in 10 grams of magnesium chloride. Now, you know that the equation for moles is equal to mass divided by molecular mass. The mass is given in the question, 10 grams, but the molecular mass you need to calculate moles. So step 1 is to calculate the molecular mass of magnesium chloride. The molecular mass of magnesium chloride is then the molecular mass of magnesium plus 2 times the molecular mass of chlorine, because there is 2 chlorines in magnesium chloride. So if you go to your periodic table, you'll see that the molecular mass of magnesium is 24. So 24 grams per mole plus 2 times the molecular mass of chlorine. If you go to your periodic table, you see that chlorine's molecular mass is 35.5. So you substitute the 35.5 in there, and then you do your calculation to get to 95 grams per mole, which is the molecular mass of magnesium chloride. Step 2 will then be to calculate the number of moles in 10 grams of magnesium chloride, which is asked in the question. The 10 grams you get from the question. The 95 grams per mole we just calculated in step 1, which brings you to 0.1053 moles. The next concept that we're going to talk about is concentration. The equation to calculate concentration is moles divided by volume. The C is for concentration, which is always measured in mole per cubic decimeter. Mole is N, and V is for volume, which is cubic decimeters or liters. Cubic decimeters is the same as liters. So, example 1. If 3.5 grams of sodium hydroxide is dissolved in 2.5 cubic decimeters of water, what is the concentration of the solution in moles per cubic decimeters? Concentration is moles divided by volume, as I just explained in the previous slide. Moles. They give you 3.5 grams of sodium hydroxide. Therefore, you need to calculate the moles. Volume. 2.5 cubic decimeters of water. So you have the volume, but you need the moles of sodium hydroxide. Step 2. How to calculate the moles of sodium hydroxide. Moles is mass divided by molecular mass. The mass is given in the question, 3.5 grams. The molecular mass of sodium hydroxide needs to be calculated. How to calculate the molecular mass of sodium hydroxide? The molecular mass of sodium hydroxide is the molecular mass of sodium plus the molecular mass of oxygen plus the molecular mass of hydrogen. The molecular mass of sodium is 23 grams per mole. The molecular mass of oxygen is 16 grams per mole. The molecular mass of hydrogen is 1 gram per mole. So if you add those together, you get to 40 grams per mole, which is the molecular mass of sodium hydroxide. Now you can go back to step 2 to calculate the moles of sodium hydroxide. Moles is mass divided by molecular mass. The moles is then 3.5 grams, which you get from the question, divided by 40 grams per mole, which we just calculated in step 1. That gives you 0.0875 moles. And now we can finally answer the question. Calculate the concentration of sodium hydroxide. Concentration is moles divided by volume. The moles we just calculated on the previous slide, 0.0875 moles, divided by 2.5 cubic decimeters, which you get from the question. That gives you 0.035 moles per cubic decimeter, which is concentration. The last concept that we need to talk about is conversions. As I said, to calculate moles, your mass needs to be in grams. It should always be in grams. So if you get a question where they give you kilograms, you need to know how to convert it into grams. In 1 kilogram, there is 1,000 grams. So to convert kilograms to grams, you need to multiply with 1,000. Let's do a quick exercise. Convert 2.5 kilograms into grams. You need to multiply with 1,000 to get to 2,500 grams. time. Time should always be measured in seconds. But what if you get a question in which the time is given in minutes? Then you need to convert the minutes into seconds. 1 minute is 60 seconds. So to convert minutes into seconds, you need to times by 60. Let's do a quick exercise. Convert 3 minutes into seconds. 3 minutes times 60 would give you 180 seconds. Here's a table that you can use, or a graph, for any conversion of time. For minutes to seconds is times 60. To go from hours to minutes, you times by 60. But to go from hours to seconds, you need to times 60 and then times 60 again. To go from days to hours, you need to times by 24. But to go from days all the way to seconds, you need to times by 24 times 60 times 60. But you always want time in seconds. So if you get a question in which the time is given in minutes, hours, or days, you can use this graphic to convert days or hours or minutes into seconds. Thank you.